Behind the neat facade of a quiet suburban street, within the walls of an ordinary home, a darkness can take root. It's a darkness that doesn't announce itself with monstrous growls or chilling whispers. It wears the face of a neighbor, a co-worker, a friend. These are the stories of individuals who walked among us, their inner turmoil hidden behind a mask of normalcy, until the day the mask finally slipped. We often imagine evil as something separate, something we could spot in a crowd. But the truth is far more unsettling. The most disturbing crimes are often committed not by caricatures of villainy, but by people who seem just like us. They held steady jobs, had families, and participated in their communities. So what happens when the ordinary becomes the unthinkable? What secret fractures lie beneath a calm surface? This isn't a story about the crimes themselves, but about the minds that conceived them. We'll peel back the layers of seemingly normal lives to uncover the subtle tales, the missed warning signs, and the psychological descent that led to tragedy. How does a mind warp so completely while the exterior remains unchanged? Let's begin with the case of Robert. To his colleagues, he was the quiet, dependable accountant. Punctual, meticulous, a bit of a loner, but harmless. He lived in the same small apartment for over a decade. His landlord described him as the perfect tenant, someone who never caused any trouble. No loud parties, no late rent, just a polite nod in the hallway. But inside those four walls, a different reality was unfolding. Investigators would later piece together a timeline, not of sudden rage, but of slow, methodical planning. His personal journals, discovered later, weren't filled with explosive anger. Instead, they revealed a chillingly detached worldview. He saw other people not as individuals with feelings and lives, but as objects, pieces on a chessboard that he could move and control for his own satisfaction. Psychologists call this a profound lack of empathy, a core trait of psychopathy. It's not about being angry or sad, it's about being empty. For Robert, the emotions of others were a foreign language he could observe but never understand. This emotional void allowed him to operate on a different moral plane, where his desires were the only thing that mattered. The warning signs were there, but they were subtle. A pattern of minor manipulations at work, a history of superficial relationships that never deepened, an inability to connect with anyone on a truly human level. People just saw him as private, not as a predator in waiting. Then there's the story of Eleanor, a devoted mother, an active member of her local parent-teacher association. Everyone described her as warm and caring, always the first to volunteer for a bake sale or organize a community event. Her social media was a curated gallery of a perfect family life, smiling children, happy holidays, and loving captions. She was the envy of the neighborhood, but beneath the surface of this idyllic picture, Eleanor was suffocating. She was trapped in a web of her own creation, a life built on the relentless pursuit of perfection. Every perceived failure, no matter how small, a child's bad grade, a burnt dinner, a critical comment from another parent, was not just a setback, but a catastrophic blow to her identity. This is a condition experts sometimes refer to as malignant narcissism. It's more than just vanity. It's a fragile ego that requires constant validation. When that validation is threatened, the narcissist's world begins to crumble. For Eleanor, her family wasn't a source of love, but a reflection of her own success. When they failed to live up to her impossible standards, she didn't feel disappointment. She felt a deep, personal betrayal. Her love was conditional, a transaction. The smiling photos hid a home filled with intense pressure and emotional control. Her children were not people to be nurtured, but props to be perfected. The tragedy that followed wasn't an act of hate, but a twisted act of preservation, an attempt to destroy the evidence of her perceived failure before the world could see it. These cases force us to confront a difficult question. What is the nature of evil? Is it an external force that corrupts, or an internal void that was always there? The patterns we see are not of monstrous villains, but of broken people. We see individuals with a chilling inability to feel for others, or those whose sense of self is so fragile that any crack threatens to shatter their entire reality. let's examine the environment. Often we find that these individuals were not born in a vacuum. While not an excuse, their history often contains clues. We might find a childhood marked by emotional neglect, where the building blocks of empathy were never laid, or a history of being rewarded only for performance, not for who they were, teaching them that their worth was conditional. Think about the concept of a successful psychopath. Many individuals with these traits never commit a crime. They thrive in corporate or political environments where a lack of empathy and a talent for manipulation can be mistaken for leadership and ambition. They climb the ladder, leaving a trail of used and discarded people in their wake, but they never cross the line into illegality. So what pushes one person over that edge while another remains within the bounds of society? The trigger is often a significant life stressor. The loss of a job, a divorce, a public humiliation. For a person with a stable psychological foundation, these events are painful but manageable. For someone with a pre-existing personality disorder, it's like a lit match in a gas-filled room. The carefully constructed facade of control shatters, and the dark impulses they've managed to suppress are unleashed. The quiet accountant loses his job and his sense of control, so he seeks to impose ultimate control on someone else. The perfect mother faces a divorce and the collapse of her public image, so she decides to erase the family that she sees as the source of her failure. What is most unsettling is that there is no easy answer, no single profile that fits all cases. We look for patterns because we want a way to protect ourselves, a checklist to identify the danger before it strikes. But the human mind is infinitely complex. The darkness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits quietly in the next cubicle, smiling politely as it plots. We are left with the echoes in empty rooms, the chilling words in a diary, and the haunted faces of those left behind who ask, how could we not have known? Perhaps the real lesson is not about learning to spot the monster, but about understanding the subtle fractures in the human psyche. It's about recognizing the profound danger of isolation, the corrosive effect of a life without empathy, and the terrifying fragility of a mind that builds its world on a foundation of lies. The truth is, we may never fully understand what goes on behind another person's eyes. And that perhaps is the most disturbing thought of all. We can only continue to ask the questions, to study the evidence, and to hope that by shining a light into these dark corners of the human experience, we might learn how to prevent such tragedies from happening again. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. If these stories raise concerns for you or someone you know, please remember that resources are available. Reaching out for professional help is a sign of strength. Subscribe for more deep dives into the complexities of the human condition. Stay safe and stay aware.